and his book, My First Coup d'etat and Other True Stories from the Lost Decades of Africa, published in July 2012, has won international praise for describing a world of love, fear, faith, despair, loss, longing, and hope despite all else. He has also written essays which have been published in the Ebony, Huffington Post, the New York Times, and The Root. In 2016, Mr. Mahama became the first sitting president to exit power after his first term when he lost to the then opposition candidate, Nana Akufo-Addo. He contested the 2020 elections again and lost to the incumbent. Mr. Mahama is the presidential candidate for the opposition National Democratic Congress, NDC, for the 2024 general elections. He is married to Mrs. Lodina Mahama and they have 5 children.
So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Let's put our hands together to welcome our guest for this evening. And shall we please stand to welcome him? Let's be on our feet to welcome him. Good evening, Your Excellency.
Hi, George. How are you?
Very well. Good to see you.
Good. Thank you. I'm good. Thank you.
Just a quick run through. You have 20 minutes to speak to Ghanaians, after which we'll sit down and talk briefly. Then we'll leave the rest for our audience here in the studio.
Okay.
So your 20 minutes starts now.
All right.
Then please take your seats.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, our audience, and thank you, Ghanaians watching from all over the country. I'm happy to be back here after so many years. The first time I came to GBC was as a young intern from the School of Communication Studies. And I have a nostalgic feeling when I see all these old studios. Not too much has changed there. Well, thank you very much. 7th December is a very critical day for Ghana. And as we do every 4 years, since we adopted constitutional democracy under the 1992 Constitution, we have elections. We've held 8 elections, and this will be the 9th. But this is no ordinary election, because it comes at a time when our nation is going through a very severe economic crisis. Actually, not only a crisis of the economy, but even a crisis of governance. There are several issues in governance that have cropped up. Low trust in the judiciary, and as you recently saw, the impasse between the judiciary and parliament, and many other issues of governance. And so this election is critical because the next government must take very critical and bold decisions in terms of both our governance and our economy. As part of the government that started the constitutional review process under Professor Mills of blessed memory, and we pushed it to a point where a citizen of this country took the whole process to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was not able to determine the matter until late in 2015. And because it was an election year, the following year, we decided to leave it for the next administration to continue. Unfortunately, it hasn't moved forward. And so one of the things we intend to do urgently when we come into office is to push the issue of constitutional review so that we can clearly define some of the clauses that we have in the Constitution so that we don't always have to run to the Supreme Court for interpretation. We have a crisis in our economy because we have a twin problem. In all the previous times that we've gone to the International Monetary Fund for assistance, it has had to do only with stabilizing the macroeconomic environment. And often you have to go to the IMF for policy credibility in order that the partners and the credit rating agencies and everybody who has an interest in investing in Ghana is certain that the fiscal reform decisions that you take are things that you intend to implement. Unfortunately, this time we have a twin problem. We have macroeconomic instability, and then at the same time we have a problem of unsustainable debt. I believe that this challenge or these problems are self-inflicted. We could have avoided these problems. We could have managed to keep our economy resilient and buoyant, even in the face of the adverse conditions that the whole world faced. And that is the difference between Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. Our economies were about the same. Ghana was a larger economy than Cote d'Ivoire, but better economic management meant that they were able to weather the storm much better than we did. We could foresee that in any developing economy or middle-income economy, definitely there will be challenges that you face, and we call them headwinds or external shocks. And so one of the things that we started to do was to build the buffers. I'll talk about that later and explain what I mean to you. But let me give the baseline so that we can understand the conversation as I go forward. At the end of our term in office, when we handed over to the MPP, we had a debt to GDP ratio of 55.6%. I'm sure many of you will be surprised, because you remember that when I was president, the MPP kept pushing the narrative that we're borrowing too much. But our debt to GDP ratio was 55.6%, that's all. And when I come to talk about their record, they borrowed until our debt to GDP went all the way to 104%. And as I speak to you, we are just at about 87, between 85 and 87%. And the adjustments we are making together with the debt exchange means that we're aiming that by 2028, we should bring the debt to GDP below 60%. We had a credit rating of B minus. And if you know that we currently are junk status, you understand what I mean. When they say your economy is at junk status, it means it's baller. Your economy is at baller. And then we had a budget deficit of 6.1%. We had a credit rating of B, which is a fairly good budget deficit, because the Fiscal Responsibility Act says that you should keep the budget deficit below 5%. And so we had a budget deficit of 6.1%, just above the 5%. And then we had a budget deficit. And then we had a stable currency, which had a depreciation rate annually of 7%. The Fiscal Responsibility Act says that we had industry growing at 4.3%, and manufacturing subsector growing at 7.9%. We had a stable currency. We also had a single-digit unemployment rate at 8.4%. And the IMF and Economic Intelligence Unit predicted that in the year following, which was 2017, because of the work we had done in 2016 in stabilizing the economy was going to grow by 8%. And so that 8% growth that we saw in 2017 had absolutely nothing to do with the MPP administration. Indeed, by the time they read their budget and started to implement, there's no way they could have influenced that growth. And yet they tout it as one of their achievements. And just imagine that even after 2017, subsequent years, the growth started to go down. When they started managing the economy themselves, just look at the growth chart. It went down to 6 point something, to 5 point something, until it eventually ended up at zero. Now, during our period in office, we realized that we needed to find new sources of revenues. And the traditional pillars of our economy were the oil and gas sector, the cocoa sector, the gold sector, and non-traditional exports. Non-traditional exports are dependent totally on the private sector, and so it has continued to do well. Of course, you also have remittances. Remittances comes to about 4 billion a year, and that has nothing to do with government's performance. But the other sectors, in terms of the gold sector, in terms of cocoa, and in terms of oil and gas, you have to create a favorable environment for those sectors to thrive. Unfortunately, under 8 years of the the MPP administration, the reverse has been the case. And so when we're in office, we created a good environment. And so a lot of investors came into the oil and gas sector. That is, by the time we left office, we had brought on stream 2 new oil fields. In 2010, our first oil field started, which was Jubilee. And that was the only field we had until I came into government. By the time I left government, we had added the 10 fields and we had added the ENI Sankofa field. And so this increased Ghana's oil and gas production. And it was good for the economy because we got more gas to reduce our dependence on crude oil for electricity generation. And then also we got more oil to be able to bring in foreign exchange. We incentivized the cocoa sector, and so by the time we left office, we exported almost 1 million tons, 967,000 metric tons approximately. That brought in almost $2 billion into the fund, into the country. Aside from that, we created buffers in order to make the economy resilient. We established the stabilization fund, and if you remember, during COVID, when government had no money at all to start the fight against COVID, we reminded them that there was money in the stabilization fund, and the money in the stabilization fund is supposed to be used when there are emergencies. And so the $270 million or so out of the stabilization fund. We also left money in the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, which we're going to start and use as our sovereign wealth fund. And we left about $250 million in that fund. We also established a sinking fund, which was to be used to retire debt that was oncoming. And so the money that we left in the sinking fund is what Ken Ofori-Atta used in September the next year when the Kufo Eurobond became due. That is what he used to offset it. If we had not set that money aside, it would have created a crisis because government would have had to look immediately for that kind of money to be able to do that. And so when they exhausted all these buffers, the sinking fund, they used it. Stabilization fund was used. Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, they used it. They did not replenish the sinking fund. And yet they went on a borrowing spree, borrowing almost $3 billion every year, most of which was going into consumption instead of into infrastructure and production. And that's why in a 5-year period, they borrowed almost $11.5 billion. And that is what has created the unsustainable debt that we have. But it raises issues of conflict of interest because the finance minister had Data Bank, which was his own bank, being the broker for government borrowing. And a conflict of interest arises there because if you are benefiting from borrowing, of course you'll be interested in borrowing more so that your company can make more money. So currently we have a crisis of our economy, an unsustainable debt, and high inflation. Inflation went up to 54%, it's now down to 23%, I think. And then also, like I said, the debt went up as a ratio of GDP to 104%, and it's now at about 85%. We have a depreciating currency, which end of 2016 was at about 4 cedis and is currently at 17 cedis. And so everything is wrong with our economy. And the economy has linkages to everything. And so once the economy is not doing well, it affects healthcare, it affects education, it affects agriculture, it affects sports and every other sector. It affects the energy sector. Indeed, the energy sector is a ticking time bomb. We resolved Doomsaw. We introduced the energy sector levy to provide enough cash to be able to pay for our generation because the Doomsaw was caused by 2 things. 1, a generational shortfall, and 2, a legacy financial debt. And so introducing the ESLA, we made sure that more money was going to come in to be able to pay for generation. And then also, because we brought in Car Power Ship and also Ameri, we brought in almost 500 megawatts. That solved the generational shortfall. So in 2016, I want to place it on record. President Akufo-Addo should not misinform people again. In 2016, there was no load shedding. Nobody had load shedding. And so Dumsor was solved long before he came into office. Again, he has sown the seeds of Dumsor, and we're feeling it already. Our lights are being put off because the energy sector debt has ballooned to almost $2 billion. In 2016, we negotiated the Millennium Challenge Compact, which was supposed to make our electricity distribution system more efficient. And part of it was to be applied for the PDS program, if you remember PDS. When they negotiated the PDS company to come and take over the downstream distribution of electricity, they used front men. And so the shares were initially given to the front men. And then when the president's family wanted to redistribute it to whoever they wanted or to themselves, the front men refused and they quarreled. And then that quarrel led to America withdrawing $190 million, which we were supposed to use for the electricity distribution system. And so since then, Electricity Company of Ghana's losses, technical and commercial losses, have gone up to 32%. There's no electricity company in this world that can survive with a 32% technical and commercial loss. That means they are unable to collect enough money. Apart from that, technical losses are things that you have to put in engineering to solve. But a big percentage of it is that you supply electricity but you're unable to collect your money. And that's why we needed private sector intervention to improve the efficiency of collection. Because they quarreled, America took $190 million away. And so as I said, ECG is making huge losses. The last time I had 10 billion CD loss, another 6 billion CD loss. If we continue like this, our energy sector is going to crash. And so Akufo-Addo has sown the seeds for Dumsor again, and already Dumsor is here. Sunon Asogli has shut down because they owe them $270 million. They owe other operators who are threatening to shut down their power systems. And so, but for the fact that some of the power stations are reasonable, they are keeping the power system on even though the debt is mounting. Aside from that, ENI that supplies gas to us has reduced their supply of gas significantly because Ghana is not paying for the gas that it is taking. And so they've reduced the supply of gas significantly. When we set up the gas supply under ENI, we supported it with a World Bank guarantee. Because of non-payment, they have drawn down on the World Bank guarantee. They've drawn down until it's left with $50 million. If they draw down on that $50 million, then it means Ghana is in default to the World Bank, and the consequences will be very difficult. So they've put this country on the brink, and something must give. After such severe mismanagement of the country, I find it strange that they have the temerity to ask us to applaud them and to even vote for them again to come and continue the mess that they have caused. And I think that Ghanaians must know the full extent of what has happened. Nothing is working in this country. Everything has gone haywire. It has even affected the Black Stars. Applaud them and to even vote for them again. The Black Stars have always been the Black Stars. I mean, we've all been proud of the Black Stars. And you can count on them to score when it matters. Today, look at the Black Stars. So sad. You know, even Sudan, we're in the same group as Sudan. Sudan played all their home matches away because there's a war in Sudan. And Sudan has qualified. Black Stars is out. And so the time has come for Ghanaians to make a change. And I can smell the wind of change coming. I can tell that Ghanaians appreciate what we did when we were in government. A lot of propaganda made Ghanaians not know that we were managing things well. They said that life was hard. They were going to come and reduce electricity prices. They were going to come and reduce petrol prices. They were going to come and reduce the cost of food because they were going to grow so much food that, the price of food will come down. Today is the reverse. The price of all these things have gone up. Petroleum has gone up. Currency is depreciating. The price of kenke has gone up. Kenke used to be 50 pesos and 1 cedi. The cost of food today is 5 cedis and 7 cedis. And for a person like me, I probably might eat 2 balls or 3 balls. And so today, if I eat 3 balls of kenke, that's 15 cedis. And then 1 chinam is 20 cedis. So you're talking about 35, 40 cedis just to have a meal of kenke. And so if a person has to have 3 square meals a day and you're spending 35 cedis on every meal, I mean, you can imagine what the the minimum wages, far less. I mean, there's no way, and that is a single individual, not to talk about a family. And so the time has come to make a change. NDC has a lot of programs, and in 20 minutes I cannot talk about all of them. But one of the major things is that we become a high-cost point for business, high-cost destination for business, because this government likes the easy way out. When you face a crisis like this, you must raise revenue and reduce expenditure. But they are raising revenue and raising expenditure. And so, I mean, you can see some of the waste and the things that they do. I mean, recently I heard that, but you're going out of government. How many days to leaving office? You're buying new Land Cruisers. For who? But that is this government for you. The president, within a 9-month period, spent 69 million Ghana cedis on foreign travel. And so these are the kinds of things. We need to cut expenditure, but at the same time we must reduce the taxes so that we become a favorable destination for investment. Today, business, foreign direct investment or businessmen who want to invest in West Africa are going to Cote d'Ivoire and to Benin instead of coming to Ghana. And that's why we're saying we'll scrap some of the levies, like e-levy. It's discouraging people from paying with their mobile money. They rather go and cash out and pay cash because they would avoid the 1.5% tax. And we told them this, they didn't listen. And so some of those taxes are things that we'll take out. The betting tax, I mean, there are no jobs, so the boys get a little money here and there from betting tax. Then you go and take 10% out of it. And so those ones too. COVID has come and gone. Why are you taxing us for COVID? We're the only country in this world that is still being taxed for COVID. And so some of those taxes are things that the last scorecard I'll give you. Ghana has always been the second largest economy in West Africa. Today we've lost that position to Cote d'Ivoire. In 2022, Cote d'Ivoire overtook us. And so we're now the 3rd largest economy. And this is under the watch of Nana Akufo-Addo and the economic whiz kid, who was supposed to come and make our economy the best. Unfortunately, he's lost, any courage to talk about economy. It's only about digital. Digital is important. And I was Minister of Communications. We laid the groundwork for all the digital revolution that you're seeing. It was us who licensed the mobile companies. It was us who laid the fiber and all that. It was us who started the .gov platforms and all that. And so yes, it's important. It facilitates production. It makes business easier to do. But you must get the fundamentals right. Your economy must work. You must manage your economy in such a way that those digital applications would add a bonus to what you're doing. But you cannot just say, I'm totally digital. You were not even trained as a digital person or a telecom. You were trained as an economist. And you were brought because you were coming to deal with the economy. So why have you suddenly shifted to a completely different professional orientation, you know, and so these are things we need to look at. But we have the Women's Development Bank. I'm sure you've all heard about it. We have the National Apprenticeship Program. We have the 1 million coders program, which they plagiarized. It was in our 2020 manifesto. They put in their 2024 manifesto and tried to accuse us of plagiarizing it. We said, just go and look in our 2020 manifesto. It's there. Just that we didn't win power, so we couldn't implement it. We have the Mahama Cares. I don't know who put my name there, but it's a medical trust in which we want to put funds to help people with kidney, diabetes, cancers, and so on. The treatment is so expensive that I think that we must set up a system that helps people who are suffering from these lifestyle diseases to be able to have some relief. We have the free sanitary pads program for girls in secondary school and some of those in junior high school because they miss school because for 3, 4, 5 days because they don't have what it takes to be able to keep themselves well. We have the stress-free fee. What is it? Free stress. No fee stress program. It's a mouthful, but it's to cancel academic fees for fresh entrants into the university. And so, in the first year, there are many cases where people qualify for university, but they are unable to take up their places because their parents cannot afford 3,700 CDs. Recently, I had to intervene with a girl who had to sit at home and help her mother sell roasted plantain because she could not afford to pay her first year admission fees into medical school. And so the girl is in school now in UDS, and we had to put some money together to assist her. And so it's something that will help a lot of people. We have the Bed for All program, that is hostels. Universities have huge tracts of land they are not using, and yet the private sector has money to invest in building hostels. And so we're going to take part of each university's land, and we're going to invite the private sector who can build hostels so that more students can get accommodation on campus instead of living off campus. We have free tertiary education for persons with disability, and they won't have to pay fees at all throughout their period in the university. We're going to decentralize the senior high school feeding program so that the schools will directly procure their food, and we'll cancel the double track. We'll work to cancel the double track so that all our kids can go to school together. And then last but not the least, we have the Jumaura program. We want to assist 10,000 young people to own their own businesses, including poultry farms. That's why I said in Kukom Kiti, and then it's in Kukomma. We'll give them Nkukoma. I said Nkukoma Kiti, and they're belittling it. But eventually I saw they also said incentivize youth to go into poultry production, and so it's the same thing. And then the last but not the least, Operation Recover All the Loot. Hold people accountable who have served in office. If you don't want to be held accountable, stay in the private sector, run your own business. You can spend our money anyhow, nobody cares. But if you accept public office, you must prepare to be held accountable. And we will hold this government accountable, because we are the ones who can hold them accountable. The reason why they want their vice president to take over is so that they can, brush away all this money under the beds, dollars found under beds and things. They can just cover up everything. But the day of accountability must come. But we will not only hold them accountable, we'll hold ourselves to accountable. And so if we are taking action against people who have looted state lands and properties and things, or stolen public monies, our appointees should also expect that the same yardstick will be measured to them when they fall foul of public conduct. So let me leave it here, and I'm sure that in the conversation we can talk some more. I'll just advise in the election that we're going to hold that we should be wary of vote buying. I know that I've had reports that money bags have gone in and are trying to influence people with money to vote for them. Remember that that you take that money, you spend it, and if you vote the wrong way and you have a government that is not able to run things, you will suffer again for another 4 years. Thank you very much. I know that.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do is that we'll go for a quick break. When we return, just shortly, we'll have a sit down with him, and then we'll go through question and answers. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
A government that is not able to run things.
Get a flower with the woman. I hear say the NDC they register people for secret too. Add thousands of names to the register. I no go lie you. I hear say they do that for the NDC headquarters. Oh yes, I will tell you. They add thousands of names to the ruling party in Stronghold. When they delete thousands of names for the opposition in Stronghold. I will tell you.
If the rumors about the electoral commission be true, then this election will be free and fair.
My thing is actually so you let the woman can't join the table. This is a hard guy.
Relax. It's easy for fire. You them off. But fire by force.
I will tell you.
The fucking move them off.
That one they focus on because the ruling party in Stronghold. When they delete thousands of names for the over here your consent.
So the rumors about the electoral commission be true, then this election will be free and fair.
My thing is actually
Welcome back, and it's GBC's 2024 presidential encounter. And today, our guest is former President John Dramani Mahama, who is contesting on the ticket of the NDC. You just heard him with his presentation, his plans for this country. We are live on GBC News. We are live on GTV. We are live on Obonu TV. We are live on Unique FM in Accra, and then 17 other radio stations across the country. On Facebook is GTV Ghana. We're also live on Ghana Broadcasting Corporation on Facebook. On X is GTV Ghana. On YouTube is Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. This happens to be the biggest platform, or media platform in Ghana. And wherever you're watching us, this is the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, your Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. Your Excellency, once again, welcome.
Thank you, George.
And I hope you're well doing.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. I have not forgotten. Today is your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
So how has the day been for you, celebrating your birthday?
Yeah,
Level 6.
it's been quite filled with a lot of activity. In the morning, at 7 o'clock, pastors came from our church. Yeah, and we had like a prayer breakfast. And then after that, I have 3 orphanages that I support. And so I went to present some items to the orphanages. And then after that, I had an international guest, a head of state of another country. He came and asked to see me, so I met with him. And then after that, I went to second chance, is it?
Okay, yes.
Philadelphia. Yeah, I went to present some. I went and then I came back and then went to Action. In fact, I came directly here.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's been my day.
It's been a very eventful day.
Yeah, very, very eventful.
What's your birthday wish?
Okay.
Yes.
To win the election.
Okay.
Oh, okay. They know my wish.
All right. Usually my first question is about GBC.
Yeah.
And this is the public service broadcaster. And you talked about you being here before and all that. If you win, what's going to be your plan for GBC?
I worked as a young intern when I was doing my postgraduate in communication studies. And so I was here in 1986. Yeah, and after that I traveled for my postgraduate in social psychology. So I have an empathy for GBC. I believe that we must have a state broadcaster, we must have state media. I believe in competition between private media and because there are some things that the state media would carry not for profits. The private media is always looking at their bottom line, their financial bottom line, not so the state media. And that is why countries like Britain still have the BBC, which is state-funded. And so we must continue to have a state-funded public broadcaster. And so whatever assistance we can give, we'll see what we can do, of course, but with the kind of crisis and the mess we're coming to meet, it's going to limit how much, space is available to do a lot of things.
But it sounds a bit convenient for you to run away from the funding because of the crisis.
No, not exactly. I'm saying that we all are going to discover what is there. Because I even believe that what we're being told is not what it is. Because I see this government awarding huge last-minute contracts. I mean, huge contracts, road contracts and other contracts, signing all kinds of, agreements before they leave. And so we're going to find that the situation is probably much worse than you and I know. They state a certain arrears position, but it means that the new government is going to inherit an arrears position that probably is worse than we thought. That's why I said one of the first things we'll do in our first 90 days in office is to hold a national stakeholders conference, economic dialogue. At that economic dialogue, we're going to open the books to Ghanaians, to let Ghanaians know exactly what the state of the economy is. Because I believe that once we are transparent with Ghanaians, they would be happy to come along for us to do the hard work that we need to bring the economy back on track.
Okay, great. You talked about debt situation and how it has really increased. What's your plan to bring it down?
Our plan is to re-establish the sinking fund as quickly as possible. The sinking fund is a fund that you establish in which you put monies that are meant to retire any oncoming debt. And so our first thing would be to establish the sinking fund and we'll look at the Petroleum Revenue Management Act again. It shows how petroleum revenues should be divided. You have the Heritage Fund, you have the Stabilization Fund, and then you have the annual budget funding amount. The annual budget funding amount, part of it, which is 70% of the total revenues, goes to GMPC. Now, if you look at the way GMPC has been spending money on useless things, I think that we must look at that again. We should just not give them that huge money and let them just keep it in the account and just use it for whatever they want. We must be able to set up an account into which the monies that are meant for GMPC are put. And as and when they need that money, the money is released to them. Because they've used it for non-core things instead of exactly for what they want. So what I was trying to say was that we need to look at the structure of that. And if there are any savings that we made in terms of, cutting down expenditure in that area, we should put it into a sinking fund. And that sinking fund should be used to address oncoming debt. Aside from that, we need to renegotiate the debt. We're not part of the debt negotiation. The debt exchange, we're not part of it. And so we didn't have anything to do with the profile that has emerged. But everybody will tell you that there's a problem with the debt profile. There are two humps, one in 2026, and then another one in 2027. The 2026 one, we're required to pay 182 billion cedis. You know how much the total budget, government budget is? It's just over 170 billion. So in 1 year, government is supposed to pay its whole budget to service a debt. It's not feasible. And so we believe that there should be a negotiation that flattens it and streamlines it. But those are discussions that we'll have to have because with the IMF and all of them, we'll have to sit and look at what is realistic. I think we're in a hurry to get a deal. And so both the IMF and our government were just in a hurry to announce to the world that Ghana has been able to successfully renegotiate. But, I mean, this is not sustainable. 182 billion in 1 year when your total budget is just about 170. It doesn't make sense.
So you're going to have a renegotiation.
And then again, in 2027, we're supposed to pay $4.2 billion. I mean, it's going to be difficult to do that.
So you renegotiate with IMF too?
We're not saying we're throwing the program away or that we're renegotiating. We're going to show the difficulties in implementing the program. That's going to be a difficulty because then it means that if we don't do that, in 2026 we have to declare another debt default. And that will even be more serious than the current situation in which we are.
So if you show the difficulty in what would be the way out? What would be your program?
Well, we'll sit with our partners. We'll sit with the World Bank, the IMF, the African Development Bank, and then see how we can together negotiate that curve, and we'll see.
Right.
I mean, currently, this government has a debt moratorium.